Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Cruz, and I am a chemistry major in the class of 2024. Today, I have the privilege and honor of introducing our Convocation speaker, David Cole Wheeler. We will get the opportunity to hear about his journey as he dealt with the unimaginable agony, and anguish following the tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14th, 2012. This is a day many of us still hold fresh in our memory, almost as if it was yesterday. On this tragic day, a mass shooting took place, resulting in the casualties of 20 first graders and 6 educators, including David's son, Benjamin Andrew Wheeler. To confront this shattering loss and the ongoing debates this event sparked on gun control, David made it his mission to promote societal change through a focus on the importance of mental health awareness and a fight against gun violence. The efforts of his work has continued to have a positive impact across the United States, protecting future generations of children nationwide and opening the eyes of Americans to the consciousness of our society. David has also played an important role in the healing of communities that have been devastated by gun violence. Through his engagement on the board of Ben's Lighthouse, an organization whose aim is to assist, elevate, and nurture children and adults who have been impacted by trauma in what is intended to be a secure and caring space. He is also able to truly embrace the tagline, "Helping is healing." And he continues to tell his story and make a difference by having open and honest conversations with people. Whether this be through his esteemed writing being featured in the New York Times, New York Magazine, and Columbia Journal Review, or his dialogues as he was featured on shows like MSNBC's The Last Word, The Rachel Maddow Show, Moyers and Company, and even the Oprah Winfrey Network. The powerful and impactful work has curated over the years has been nationally recognized. It is with honor that we are able to hear and learn from David as he continues to inspire others with his story. Now please join me in welcoming David Cole Wheeler to Carleton College.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I especially would like to thank Noel Ponder and the Convocations Committee for having me here today. It's nice to see you all. So this is a family photograph of my family in August of 2012. This was taken at the Bronx Zoo. Our eldest son, Nate, was 9 at the time, and then that's our younger son, Ben, who was then 5. He was about to turn 6. His birthday is September 12th. This is the last family picture that was taken of us together in early December of 2014, or 2012, I'm sorry to say. This was taken for the Trinity Episcopal Church bulletin and program and yearbook. So I want to tell you a little bit first about who Ben was. He was an incredibly energetic 6-year-old boy. And those of you who know 6-year-old boys know that this is something that happens a lot, right? This is a picture that his uncle, his great uncle, took of him, and he titled this picture "Boy in Flight," and that pretty much encapsulates Ben. Nothing moved fast enough for Ben. He rushed headlong through life, and he was rarely connected to the earth, and this is kind of an emblematic image in that way. He was a smart kid, he had a great sense of humor, but he himself had trouble controlling that 6-year-old boy energy the way many 6-year-old boys do. I remember one night specifically, we were at dinner, I'd had a long day at work, I was tired, he was acting up, and his behavior was just getting unruly, and so I picked him up, and I just had enough, and I picked him up, sort of carrying him across my body this way, and I was going to take him upstairs and sit him on his bed and have a conversation about what we do at dinner and what we don't do, right? And halfway up the stairs, he bites me, right here, and I still have the scar. And I sat him down and I said, "Sweetheart, you can't bite people. I know you're frustrated. I know you're angry. I know things aren't going your way, but we don't bite people." And he said, "But Dad, I had to bite something." And in this at this time, I'm sort of glad that I have that scar. He was athletic. He liked to play soccer. This picture was taken probably just a little before he figured out that you kick the soccer ball. You don't carry the soccer ball, but he did figure it out. He loved playing soccer. He might very well have had perfect pitch. There was a time when he and my wife were leaving the pediatrician's office, and they were going into the car, and he said, "Mommy, what's that C in the elevator?" And she said, she thought maybe he meant like a button with a C on it or something, and she's a music teacher, and she was teaching him piano. So they got home, and she said, "Honey, sing that C from the elevator again." She didn't know what he was talking about, and he must have been talking about some kind of background hum because he sang this note, and she went to the piano, and she found it, and it was a C. And then she said, "Sing an A," and he sang it, and it was an A. And she did a couple more notes, and he could pull pitches right out of his head, which means he might have had perfect pitch. I had a different relationship with Ben than his older brother. He suffered from what I sometimes call second child syndrome, right? Just not as many movies, not as many photographs, just not as many because the novelty, to be frank, has worn off a little bit. He loved his older brother. They were best friends. He wanted to do everything his older brother was doing, go everywhere he went, be everything he was. They were very, very tight. He wanted to be a paleontologist like his brother. His brother at 9 wanted to be a paleontologist at the time, but he also wanted to be an architect. And then he also wanted to be a lighthouse keeper. He loved lighthouses, and I don't really exactly know why. It was just something he gravitated toward. We had taken him to see lots of lighthouses in our travels, and for some reason he loved lighthouses. It was kind of his thing. In this school picture that September, you can see he still has a touch of that 6-year-old shyness, that kids sometimes have. But I want to give you an example of his energy. So this is back before I had a good video camera on my phone, but this is an example of how, like many kids, he gets silly in front of a camera, but this is what Ben was like. Yeah, you got to think about elevators and tornadoes, not quite sure. And yes, Ben, yes, the head of your dad is an oval. That is true. This is Newtown, Connecticut. The center white spire you see is the Newtown Meeting House, built in 1720. The Gothic church to the right of that is Trinity Episcopal Church, where Ben and his brother and my wife were members. And then to the left of that is the iconic Newtown flagpole. It is the symbolic and physical center of town. It rises 150 feet straight out of the intersection of Main Street and Churchill Road. There's no guardrail. There's no boundary. There's no median. It gets hit twice a month, and nothing will change because it's New England. That morning was an odd morning, the morning of December 14th, 2012. I had previously arranged with my wife to switch cars. It was early December and my car needed snow tires. I have a 50-mile commute to the office, so she was going to take my car, get the snow tires, and I was going to take her car and drive to work. And halfway to work, I realized I had the boys' backpacks in the trunk. They never came out from the night before. So they had to improvise with paper bags for lunches and no school folders and all that. Ben had a cough that morning and some sniffles. And Francine looked at me and she said, "Should I keep him home?" And I said, "No." I said, "Think about how your life is going to be turned completely upside down if he stays home. Go, take him. He's not that sick. He's fine." Because that's what we do. We send our kids to school, right? And so she sent him to school. Now, Nate had book club that morning early, about an hour early. So they dropped him off at school first. And then he was with her, and she said, "We have an hour. Do you want to go back to home and wait for the bus, or do you want to go to Starbucks and get a treat?" Well, obviously, Starbucks. So they went to Starbucks, and she got a coffee, and he got a chocolate milk, and they sat and they talked for almost an hour. An hour they almost never, ever had any other morning. And that's where he told her about wanting to be a paleontologist and do everything Nate did, and be an architect too, but also be a lighthouse keeper. I drove to the office. At about 10 o'clock that morning, I got a call from Francine, and she was already at the dealership getting the snow tires, and she said, "Can you check something out? Something's going on at school. Can you check it out?" So I went online, and I didn't see anything, but then I got an email from the district saying that all the schools had been locked down. And I don't quite know why I did this. I called the offices of our town newspaper, because I figured they have a police scanner. They're going to know exactly what's going on. So I called them, and they said, "Yes, there's a shooting, and it looks like it's serious." And I gathered my things, and I left that desk, and I would not go back to that desk for 3.5 months. As I'm racing home, Francine texts me, and she says, "I have Nate. We're at the firehouse." The Sandy Hook Volunteer Firehouse sits at the foot of the driveway, the long driveway to Sandy Hook Elementary School. It shares a little entranceway, and then there's a big parking lot, and there's the firehouse. And she said, "We're waiting for Ben. I don't have Ben. I have Nate meet us." So I expected, as I got closer to town, I expected to see, in my mind, I thought I would see ambulances coming past me going the opposite way to the hospital in Danbury, but I didn't see any. And then when I got to the center of Sandy Hook, to the crossroads there in the middle of the village of Sandy Hook, there were media trucks that had already shown up, some emergency vehicles, lots of people around. Clearly something big was going down. I got to the intersection, and there was a police officer there, and he said, "You can go that way or that way, but you can't go that way." I said, "I have to go that way. My family's at the firehouse. I got to get to the firehouse." He said, "You can't. You go that way or that way." I said, "Okay." So I turned right, and as I made that turn, I remembered that the parking lot of the smaller Episcopal church in Sandy Hook, it's called St. John's, is right sort of over the hill from the firehouse, because that parking lot goes pretty far back. So I parked in the back of the parking lot, went over the hill, past the daycare and the senior center, across the driveway entrance to the firehouse where I met Francine and Nate. In retrospect, I look back at seeing the faces of the first responders that were there along with all of the other people, and they were drawn, and they were ashen and gray. Something in their eyes I didn't understand at the time. And of course, looking back now, I realize that they knew. They knew what had happened in that school. They knew what we would not know for another 5 hours. I want to explain to you what this felt like to get that news, emotionally, right? Personally. It's like I was on a train, racing through a dark tunnel at a speed that I couldn't believe was even safe. If you've ever been to New York City and you've ridden on some of those express trains, you know how they hurtle through these dark tunnels, and they go back and forth and they shake, and you can't believe that that is safe. And you're racing along. So that's what it was like. I felt like I was on this train with my family, racing through this dark tunnel, and there's this enormous crash and this lurch, and the lights go out, and then the lights come back on, and I get up off the floor. I feel like I've fallen down, and I'm looking around, and the people around me are sort of looking back at me with furrows of concern, and I'm back on this train. And then I see something out of my periphery, and it's another train in the same tunnel going in the same direction at the same speed. And I think, well, that's weird. I didn't know there were 2 sets of tracks in this tunnel, both going in the same direction. That doesn't make sense. And I bend down to get a closer look into the train next to me, and I see this man, and he's standing on the train, and he's bathed in the same yellow fluorescent light I am, and I look closer, and I see that it's me. And he's standing there with his family, with his wife and his 2 kids, and I'm on this train with my wife and my 1 son, because just like that, our younger son is gone. And the panic sets in, and I realize that lurch, that crash that I felt, it changed everything. And now I'm on this train with my wife and my son, and I don't know where we're going. And I look over, and there's the train I'm supposed to be on. I know I'm supposed to be on that train. It's right there. I can see it. And I'm not on it. And I don't know where this train is going. And I don't know when it's going to get there. And I don't know what kind of shape we're going to be in when we get there. And there's nothing I can do about it. That happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday, December 14th, 2012, when it became clear that our 6-year-old son, Ben, was not going to come down the driveway. No more kids coming down the driveway, being ushered down by an overwhelmed teacher, like our son Nate had been by his gym teacher. No more news. Just an increasing number of men and women with badges and blue windbreakers with yellow or white initials on the back, handing me their business cards. Just like that, I was on the wrong train. So this is Ben's first grade class picture from that year. The teacher you see in this picture was out that day. She was almost never out, never missed a day. She was out that day, though, because she had a doctor's appointment. She had just learned that she was, for the first time, pregnant. All of those kids except one, 6 kids in the other room, 6 teachers and staff people, gone in 10 minutes and 40 seconds. So we sent Nate to stay with friends overnight. We came back to the house. We were told to get some sleep and that we'd be notified in the morning, but right around midnight, there was a knock at the door, and I knew exactly what it was. And we went downstairs in our bathrobes, and there at our doorstep was another state trooper, a priest, and a Red Cross volunteer. And we invited them in, and we sat in the living room, and envelopes of information and applications and paperwork was handed out, and people were telling us about this and that and the other thing. I didn't retain very much of it. I remember this, though. The Connecticut State Trooper had to, by law, apparently, or at least this is the custom, get down on one knee to tell us the official news. As a representative of the state, as a representative of state agency, he had to get on one knee to tell us this. And I think about that now, I think about that scene, and I realize that at that same time, that was happening in 25 other houses in our area. Friends and family started coming to the house, cycling through the house, helping us in every way you could imagine, doing everything for us. Monday, we were able to go to the funeral home and visit Ben and say goodbye. I brought him his Cub Scout hat and some toys that he had made in Cub Scouts, and my wife got a lock of his hair. And we were able to say goodbye, and we were lucky. We were in the minority of parents who were able to see their kids. Most of the parents were told, this is not something you want to do. One of the reasons we were lucky is because the mortician who worked on Ben, a very gentle, kind, amazing soul named Sean, he was a mortician in the military in Afghanistan. The service was on Thursday, and then after the service, we interred his ashes in the town cemetery. And right away, almost right away, the predictable camps started publicly saying the predictable kinds of things, right? One side is screaming, it's the guns, and the other side is screaming, it's the mental health, it's the crazy people. And I thought, well, which is it? I wasn't going to be satisfied with easy answers. I wanted to know. This horrific, unimaginable tragedy had been visited on our family, on our town, on our schools, on our friends, on our neighbors. What do we have to do? Why did this happen? What do we do to keep this from happening again? And I started looking into it. And I knew the easy answers weren't always going to be the right ones, right? They're not always the right answers, the easy ones. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized what an incredible illustration our little town in Connecticut made, what it provided in an almost shocking way of some larger things in our society that have gone wrong. And I'll show you what I mean. But if you use the definition of a mass shooting as being 4 or more people killed or injured in a single event, the conservative estimate is that there have been almost 300 mass shootings since Ben was killed. We're going on 10 years. There were 4 this Monday alone. Imagine going for a whole year and not looking at your phone and seeing news about what happened in Sacramento or what happened any number of other places, the innumerable places since then. How do we get to a year like that? How do we do that? The triangle denotes change in math and science, delta, right? We have to change the way we think about some things, but not just internally, and I'll show you what I mean. This is an aerial photograph of Newtown, okay? So on 100 acres, right in the middle of Newtown, there stands the crumbling remains of the Fairfield Hills State Psychiatric Hospital. 13 buildings built between 1931 and the early 50s. At its height, it housed over 4,000 patients. But it's crumbling now. It's abandoned. Why? Well, in the late 60s, there was a policy called De-Institutionalization, where all of these hospitals in practically every state decided that the situation in these hospitals was not beneficial to the patients and they should be de-institutionalized, and that comprised three things, right? The social movement toward more open hospitaling, more open care for psychiatric patients, the advent of psychotropic drugs, which made it possible for patients to take a medicine and be managed rather than needing 5 or 6 healthcare workers, plus the movement of money from the budgets of the state to pay for these things to the federal budgets, right? So they closed all the psychiatric hospitals, trying to get these patients into community services, but it was the 70s, the recession hit, the money dried up, and those community services were never supported in the way that the entire plan was suggested at the beginning, right? So it was kind of a broken social contract. And obviously, when state and federal budgets are cut, human services are very often the first thing to go. Some experts think deinstitutionalization was a success. They think that those conditions in those hospitals were worth getting rid of at any cost. Abuse, neglect, warehousing, overcrowding. There's an argument to be made for that. Some think it also was a failure because of where we are now. So after years of operating almost empty, Fairfield Hills closed in the early 90s. The town purchased the property 10 years later. So where are those people now? Many of them are homeless. Many more of them are in prison. The Human Rights Watch, nonprofit organization, estimates that 56% of prisoners in America suffer from a brain illness or some advanced personality disorder. So our prisons are being used as surrogate brain health facilities and surrogate substance abuse facilities, right? People are allowed to live their lives until they make a mistake in public, and then they get put into the system. They get arrested, they get put into a prison run by a corporation that has financial responsibilities to its shareholders. So we are not solving this problem. We're just kicking it down the road. Again, the aerial map of Newtown, right? About maybe 1,000 yards or so to the east of Newtown, on former Fairfield Hills property, is the Garner Level 4 Maximum Security Correctional Facility. It's a prison. The U.S. has the highest incarceration rate in the world. I was shocked to learn. We have less than 5% of the global population. We have almost a quarter of the world's prisoners here. The U.S. has more prisoners in here. We have more prisoners than high school teachers. We have more prisons than Russia, 4 times as many. So with all of these, over half of these prisoners suffering from some kind of brain illness, and you'll notice I said brain illness instead of mental illness, and I did that on purpose, because mental illness connotes of the mind, and you cannot put the mind under a microscope, right? These conditions that we now observe in this population are diagnosed by symptoms, not brain pathologies, right? We don't know that much about the brain. We know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the human brain. Depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, psychosis, these are diagnosed how? By behaviors. We don't know what physical characteristics of the brain make a person predisposed toward violent behavior. That doesn't mean we can't know, but right now we don't. And these personality disorders and these kinds of brain illnesses, they're seen as deficiencies of character socially, right? I mean, a lot of situations, you meet somebody who's got one of these brain illnesses, and the first thing society thinks is, well, there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with them. And it's very easy to make that unintended leap to, they did something to deserve this. And what I found was fascinating is that multiple sclerosis, cancer even, those diseases were also thought of in that way not so long ago. But then we did the science, and we found out how they affect us on a cellular level in the brain and the body, and we don't think that way anymore. There are some organizations, and I'm just going to talk about a few, just give you a handful of organizations that are working to do some of this. One that I particularly care about is the Aviel initiative at the University of Chicago. It was founded by my late friend, Dr. Jeremy Richmond, and his wife, Jennifer Hensel, named after their daughter, Aviel, who was in the classroom next to Ben's. They focus on preventing violence through research. They grant funding to people who are doing the work and making the kind of strides necessary to understand these environmental factors and these pathologies and how they interact to make a person predisposed toward violence. And Jeremy used to tell me all the time, we just don't have the technology. It's just not fine enough yet, but we'll get it. We'll get there. We'll get to the point where you can use the technology, right? This is Aviel, and Ben, you notice he's got that look on his face like, why does she have her arm around me? They were friends because their parents were friends. We were forcing, we were forcing them together, right? Rather than the other way around, which is more often the case. So we have to change the way we think about brain illness. Imagine a world where you take a child to a doctor and they get some sort of a scan, and the doctor looks at the results of the scan and she says, oh, this structure here shows me that this child is predisposed toward this kind of possible behavior. Maybe it's schizophrenia, maybe it's depression, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's violence. And then that is treated the way you treat a viral infection or a bacterial infection. I think that would go an awful long way toward removing the stigma of brain illness in our society, but we're not there yet. So we can work on removing the stigma first, right? So the other side is screaming, it's the guns, it's the guns. The problem is the guns, right? America loves its guns. The FBI estimates there are over 200 million privately owned firearms in this country. If you add the firearms of the military and law enforcement, that is more than one gun for every man, woman, and infant in this country. Again, less than 5% of the global population. We have 42% of the civilian-owned handguns in the world. Guns are here to stay. Anybody who says, we just have to get rid of all the guns, they're not being practical or realistic. That is never going to happen. I could do a whole other talk on my issues with the Second Amendment, but that's another conversation. What's important to recognize at this juncture, however, is that most American firearms owners are responsible people who believe that they are knowledgeable and know how to care for those products. It's also a big business, $12 billion a year. Do you know there's 161 gun manufacturers in the United States? There's 160 in the rest of the world combined. Connecticut is the birthplace of the American gun industry. That'll ring true for you in a minute. So let's say you make a product, right? And the market for your product starts to shrink. So the number of American hunters who use guns only for hunting, or who hunt with guns, rather, has shrunk per capita 1.5% every year since the late 50s. So when your market starts to shrink and you're making something, what do? Well, it's business 101, right? You create a bigger market. You create a new market. You expand your market. You tell people, no, you don't just need one of these things. You need two of them, a different kind. You don't just want to use it for this one thing. You want to use it for these other things too, like protecting your home and your family, right? And playing into your sort of desire to be seen as the protector, right? And then, as a last resort, you say, you also just want to own this because it is really, really cool, and it will make you cool. My son and his classmates were killed with a Bushmaster AR-15, 223 caliber model XM15E2S. And for a time, that exact weapon was marketed with this ad. You're not a man unless you buy this gun. Now, look, the whole point of the advertising and marketing industry, right, is to make you believe that your life will not be complete until you buy whatever it is that they're selling, which will magically make your life perfect, right? It's been that way since the dawn of commerce. I get it. But what kind of society allows manhood to be defined like this? Fortunately, very recently, this has changed a little bit, in small part because of a lawsuit that I was a party to, where Bushmaster and Remington were sued for using unfair marketing practices in the state of Connecticut. And a lot of this tactical bro marketing has cooled because the insurance companies now realize that they're not immune to this particular avenue of inquiry. But the industry is still protected, and you'll see what I mean. So here's our aerial map again, all right? 1,000 yards to the west of Fairfield Hills is a modest, well-designed office building. Houses the national offices of the NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Their mission is to promote and protect and preserve hunting and shooting sports. They are the national headquarters for the manufacturer's industry trade group. It's their head office. The NSSF takes in $26 million a year. They spend $2 or $3 million a year lobbying Congress to relax regulations on guns. They create curricula for industry and manufacturers' educational programming. They promote gun ownership so that manufacturers can be profitable. It's a trade group. It's what they do. They sponsor the industry annual trade show. It's called the SHOT Show, Shooting, Hunting, and Outdoor Trades. It's the largest single annual trade show in the country, every year in Las Vegas. So if you look at our map, these three dots that I've just described to you, right? The level 4 maximum security prison, the failed psychiatric hospital, the national industry trade group headquarters, they make a line right in the middle of Newtown. And if you think of that line at the base of a triangle, less than a mile away, at the top of that triangle is where all of these social issues intersected. Sandy Hook Elementary School. So what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary School that morning? It wasn't a sane, balanced person with an incredibly powerful firearm. And it wasn't a desperate, violently obsessed, deranged person with a brain illness with a golf club or a bat or a knife even, right? It was the intersection of those things. The intersection. It was that kind of desperate person with easy access to the most lethal consumer product our species has ever devised, that was designed to do one thing only, to fire a projectile fast enough to kill a person. This triangle has to mean change too. Now, the manufacturers of military-style weapons and these kinds of weapons, they tacitly admit the unrivaled lethality of their products. And in 2005, the entire industry was quietly exempted from the Consumer Protection Act, signed by George W. Bush. You cannot sue a gun manufacturer you simply cannot, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions are if the weapon itself was faulty somehow, if the retailer or the manufacturer knew they were selling it to someone who they knew was going to use it for an illegal purpose, impossible to prove, or if they broke other state laws, established existing state statutes in doing so, right? This is called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. It was marketed as a bulwark against, remember when people were all worried about frivolous lawsuits? Well, that's what this was all about. That's how they sold it. No other industry has blanket protection from consumer protection law. You know, so we hear the argument a lot, like, what about cars, right? You've heard this so many times, right? What about cars? You know, cars kill people, let's get rid of all the cars, right? A car has a specific purpose of intended design. If a person dies in a car, the car is not being used for its intended purpose, right? In fact, car manufacturers every year are touting new safety features in their cars, right? Every year there's something that makes a car safer. When a person dies from a bullet fired from a gun, that product is doing the only thing it was designed to do. The assault rifle was conceived, refined, and designed by the US military for one purpose. Now, if a car company makes a car that kills people, it's subject to product liability law, right? So is everything you come in contact with your entire life, from your shoelaces to your eyeglass frames, everything, except one product, the firearm. No other industry has this blanket protection. So let's talk a little bit about numbers, right? There are roughly 88 gun deaths a day, almost 33,000 every year. 7 of them a day are under 19 years old, Americans under 19 years old. Almost 600 of them are deemed accidental by state medical examiners or coroners, but that number is probably low since medical examiners and coroners don't use the same qualifications or protocols from state to state. They're different, so that number is probably low. 67% of annual gun deaths in this country are suicide. Think about this. The time from ideation to action, right? The time the person gets the idea to commit suicide, the time they do something about it, is an hour, roughly, right? That's the average. If 22,000 people a year, this is important too, 9 out of 10 people who survive a suicide attempt don't try again. So if 22,000 people a year did not have easy access to a firearm, almost 20,000 of them might still be alive today. Because by the time you decide that violence and death is the answer to your problems, it's not what's in your head that matters. It's what's in your hand that matters. There are almost 200 non-lethal firearms accidents every day. And the people, those change lives, right? They change lives. So clearly, it's the intersection of these people in distress or with criminal intent with this incredibly powerful, lethal consumer product, the most lethal, the most lethal consumer product our species has ever devised, right? So guns aren't going away. The powerful industry lobby has made it so that their products are immune from legal recourse. You cannot, as a free American citizen, take action against this company when a wrong is done to you. So how do we get to that year with no shootings? So we have to change the way we think about these consumer products, because that's what they are. If any of us had the money or the inclination, right, we could go out tomorrow and we could get one of those. It only costs about $13 to $15 million. So we could go get one, we could fill it with jet fuel, we could take it out on 35, and we could have a blast, and that would be awesome. How far do you think we would get until a state trooper pulled us over and said, you can't have that out here. You can't drive that on this road. It's not safe, right? So it becomes a matter of public safety. We have changed the way we think about so many things already, right? You cannot smoke in public places anymore. The American Medical Association, these ad agencies got together over the years. They had an intense program, and they made the rate of smokers drop precipitously. Historically, 50 years ago, right? If you went to the movies and the movie hero smoked, right? It's the cool guy smoking. You go to the movies now, somebody has a cigarette, they're like maybe an outsider, maybe things aren't going incredibly well, maybe they're a little troubled. Society has changed the way we think about this consumer product. 40 years ago, the term designated driver didn't exist, but through the efforts of society, forces in society, whether it was the medical association or advertising industry and the manufacturers, there's an estimated 65% drop in alcohol-related traffic fatalities because of that work over the years. And we didn't ban cars, and we didn't ban alcohol. Okay? In fact, as I said, car companies are working to make cars safer every day. The technology exists. The technology also exists to make firearms safer. It exists now. It's in your pocket on your phone. Why aren't we using it? We changed the way prescription drugs are packaged. We changed the way household cleaning products are packaged, right? You can't get a permit to build an in-ground swimming pool in most of this country unless you show a plan to the municipality that includes a fence. These are all examples, right? Look at this. Remember this poster? Everybody knows what to do when the guy at the next table is choking on a piece of steak, right? We need a poster like this to show people what to do when they observe someone who is at risk from a brain illness, or how to understand and recognize when there's a situation that could go completely wrong. Signs of distress, right? And there are organizations also working on this, and one of them that I'll tell you about is Sandy Hook Promise. It was created by a group of friends and neighbors in our town after the shooting. Some parents in affected families now work there. They have created something called Promise Communities. They give tools and programs to towns and school districts to promote healthy development, mental wellness, community connectedness, and gun safety. And these tools are used by parents and in the homes and in the schools and communities all across the nation. It's been very successful. You can check it out at sandyhookpromise.org. There's information there. This is the Asking Saves Kids, the Ask campaign, right? It's part of the Brady organization. And their focus is starting conversations in immediate situations about the safety of firearms in the home. Okay? In 2005, a study by the journal Pediatrics showed that 1.7 million children live in a house with a gun that is unsecured and loaded. And that was almost 15 years ago, right? So those numbers are certainly higher now. So if you have a kid who's got a really serious peanut allergy, right? And they go to a party and there's a giant bowl of peanut M&Ms right on the table, first thing you see when you walk in, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the host and you're going to say, hey, look, my kid needs to stay away from that bowl. Can you make sure they don't put their fist in that bowl, right? Those are the kinds of conversations we need to have about these consumer products that people keep in their homes. AskingSavesKids.org is the website that you can see that. So you're sitting there thinking now, well, what can I do, right? So here's what you can do. You can have these conversations. Where do you start? Think about your life as a series of concentric circles. The first concentric circle is your family. Are people getting the help they need? Do people have access to firearms who maybe shouldn't have access? Are those firearms securely stored? Are they kept loaded? Your friends. And then finally, your community as well. And then, as you heard in the introduction, there's an organization that I'm very close to. You got to try to have these conversations about this fatal intersection, right? I'm talking about that intersection. When I look at what happened to my family in our town, when I look at what happened in Newtown, I see the whole thing as like a line of dominoes, right? Think about all of the different and specific and complicated dominoes that had to line up just exactly that way that morning for things to turn out the way they did. And when I look at that line of dominoes, all I see are the spaces in between where somebody, somewhere along the way, could have stopped the next domino from falling by maybe having just one conversation Ben loved lighthouses. This is a picture of him at Nauset Light on Cape Cod, his favorite lighthouse. An organization grew up around us called Ben's Lighthouse. My wife is now very active in that organization, and the idea behind that organization is to connect the children in our town with each other and the surrounding towns, to help promote an understanding of empathy, to teach them to find their light inside. And mostly work with preschool kids, really young kids, to teach them about expressing their feelings and doing it in a way that is healthy with each other in a community. benslighthouse.org is the URL. So, change. How do we be this? How do we make this change? You have to be the change. You've heard it a million times. You have to be the change that you want to see in the world. If you have resources, you can investigate these organizations and you can support them. The organizations that do work in brain health, organizations that are mental wellness foundations, organizations that support responsible, sensible, rational gun legislation. In school, you can study it, you can do the research, you can do the science. If you have the time, you can volunteer to help these organizations because you have to be this change. In August of 2013, I sat in a very well-appointed, comfortable room on the lower level of Trinity Episcopal Church, overstuffed armchairs, nice big sofa, and I talked for 2 hours. 2.5 hours with the father of the young man who had executed my son. We talked about a lot of things, and it was really, really hard. It was really hard. And the only reason I tell you that is because if I can do that, you can certainly do this. If I can have those conversations, you can certainly pay attention to what's happening around you in your life, in the people in your life, and have those conversations where necessary to avoid that fatal intersection. I find great comfort and meaning and beauty in our expanding understanding of our observable universe. For me, that usually means standing out at the end of my driveway looking at the stars. And I have a lot of questions, existential questions, big questions, but I know one thing. I've come to realize one thing. I know why we're here. I know why I'm here. I know why we're all here. There's only one reason that we're all here on this ball of dirt, right? One, to take care of each other. We're not here to protect our stuff. We're not here to keep other people from finding joy. We're not here to win the game. There's a lot of people who think we're here to win the game, and I can guarantee you on their deathbed, they're not going to be thinking about that. We are here to protect each other. Here's a quote. Be nice to each other. It's really all that matters. This was the motto, the rallying cry of Dawn Hochsprung, the late principal of Sandy Hook Elementary School, the first person to die at the school that morning. So, if we have a grievance, no resolution to that grievance is going to be found in an equally bitter opposing grievance, right? You have to come to this with an open hand and an open heart. You have to come to this with a place of love, with a place of respect for the people who may have made every decision in their lives from a room in the house of fear. That is hard. The path can't be found in the tangled, overgrown part of the forest, and a map can't be read in a clenched fist. We have to be open and willing to talk to each other. And I understand that what I'm asking for could take years, and that's unfortunate, not least because almost 3,000 American children have been killed by guns since Ben died. Almost 300,000 people total. Since I've been standing here talking to you, 7 Americans have been killed from a bullet at the end of a gun. 7. Since we've been together. So where we are now is not where we need to be, right? This pervasive, mistakenly fatal, casual attitude that we have toward these intentionally designed products of maximum lethality, that has to change. We can't be so casual about these things. As a people, our benign misguided neglect of people with brain illness and the things they suffer, that has to change. You students here, sooner than you ever could know, are going to be our next generation of parents. If the generations can work together to establish this kind of trust, the conversations in the circles I talked about, trust, then we can start to do things that are going to change the situation to increase public awareness, public safety, sensible behavior, responsible communities, to keep each other from dying needlessly, right? So at the end of every day, we had a ritual with Benny at bedtime. It was often me. He demanded that I scratch his back. And he was very insistent about how I do it and where I scratch his back. And it was hilarious. And I thought, this is so funny, I have to record this at some point. So I brought a little recorder up into his room and I put it on his bed and I recorded this. If you listen carefully, you'll hear two things. You might hear me trying really hard not to crack up. And then the other thing you'll hear at the end, if you listen carefully, you'll hear the exact moment that he falls asleep, right? There's a little whimper, and then he lets out this big sigh, and then another little noise. And at that last little noise, he's asleep.
Left, right. Down, left, up, left, down, left, up, left, down, right, up, left, up.
Good night, buddy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for being here today with us. And thank you all for being here as well. We have a few minutes for questions and answers. If anyone would like to ask a question, we have, okay, very good.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Mary Louise Grow. I've been working on gun violence prevention for probably 35 years, and I think no message is conveyed more powerfully than you've given it to us today.
Well, thank you.
I think I heard I read an article that actually the number of gun deaths in the last year is now approaching 45.
Yes, it is. In the last year, yeah, there's been an uptick in gun violence. It happened before the pandemic and it continued through the pandemic. It's surpassed a number of different markers in terms of what kills Americans, things that we thought it would never surpass, and it has.
The timing of this is fortuitous. There's going to be a vigil in Bridge Square at 4:30 on Saturday afternoon in memory of all the people who've died from guns. And if those of you here have been deeply touched by what happened to Ben and happens to too many others in this country, please come to the vigil. We'd like our numbers to show our concern. So 4:30 Bridge Square, I'm inviting everybody here. Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, Mary.
Hello, thank you very much. It's a wonderful speech.
Thanks.
I agree with you 100% about guns and the violence that's committed with them, especially the assault rifles. My sister was a a victim of gun violence.
I'm sorry.
Many years ago, But since guns are already out there, and as you said, they're already out there, and without changing the Second Amendment, that probably will not be changed.
Right.
Maybe we can control the sales of assault rifles.
Right.
But in lieu of that, has any talk been made, I haven't heard of it, about taking advantage of the phrase in the Second Amendment about a well-regulated militia
Right.
being necessary for the preservation and so forth of the state, to use that as a means of controlling the sale of ammunition? Because without the ammunition, a gun is just a club.
Right. Right.
If we can control the sale of ammunition, that's one thing we can do, even though the guns are already out there.
Right.
If you have to be a part of a well-regulated, state-regulated militia in order to purchase ammunition, then it would probably make a big difference. Not in all cases.
I agree. I think that's an excellent way to look at it. I know that some people are trying to do that exact thing, whether it comes to ammunition or large capacity magazines or certain kinds of weapons. You know, people will go back and forth and cherry pick statistics, but the fact is that the assault weapons ban worked. You know, this kind of activity was lower during the assault weapons ban, and then when more of them were sold after the ban expired, these kinds of events increased. So regulating ammunition is absolutely the right way to go in a lot of cases, and people are working hard on that, but that's a very good idea. Yeah. The problem I have with the Second Amendment is that it's not written very well. It's bad writing. It's unclear, it's vague. You know, people will go back and forth about what the word regulated means, you know? But look at it this way. They say arms, right? Shall not infringe the right to bear arms. We don't even know what that word means. There's no way that the Founding Fathers could have foreseen what the word arms means now when they were there, when they were writing that amendment, right? I mean, could you tell me what arms is going to mean in 200 years? Could be a chip in your eyeball that vaporizes somebody with a laser. Could be. So we have no way of knowing. So it's just vague and badly written. It just needs to be specified so that people don't have as much room to make up their own interpretation. Anybody else?
Thank you for sharing your story.
Sure.
As someone who's also from Connecticut, I'm from Norwalk. The events definitely hit a lot close to home too.
Sure.
When I was in high school, I actually played Ultimate Frisbee against the Newtown High School team, and one day coming back from a game, I was being driven home by one of my friend's mothers, and it was from there that I learned that she was a conspiracy theorist, and that includes the events of Sandy Hook and all that. And this was in 2017, and it feels like the issue of misinformation, conspiracy theories have only gotten stronger and bigger. And you've talked about trying to listen and trying to, have these conversations, but when you have people who aren't willing to listen to reason, or perhaps their reality is so warped by whatever force, as someone just kind of in the forefront, what's your view on that, and how have you, when dealing with these kinds of people or whatnot, what have you come to any realization or any sort of...
Sure, absolutely. Well, we've dealt with this a lot. These kinds of people who think this way, conspiracy theorists, et cetera, they have called our house. They have sent emails and letters and countless social media posts directed specifically at us, often by name. Now, I'm pretty public about my story. I'm here, right? So those of us who have our heads up above the parapets, we are the ones that get aimed at first. So a lot of that stuff came toward me and my family and other members of the group of families who have been public. So what I found very quickly when talking to people like this is that you have to understand there are a number of reasons why people do this. There are a number of reasons why people's brains work this way. Let's look at the brain illness continuum. We are all on this continuum somewhere, right? The continuum of mental wellness, right? And when you talk about a conspiracy theorist, there could be any number of reasons why these people believe these things. And as I somewhat cynically say, on one hand, it could really just be broken wiring, right? It could be a pathological situation. It could just be medical. It could just be structural. On the other hand, you have maybe not enough hugs from daddy, right? So you have this entire continuum of why people need to believe in something bigger than themselves. And the people who have studied conspiracy theorists, they have learned that the number one motivating factor for why people buy into this stuff is because they want to be a part of something bigger than they are. They want to belong to a group of people who agree with them. The second reason is because they feel powerless in their own lives, and this kind of world vision makes them feel like they know something that we don't, and that they are the keepers of the actual truth, so they feel some semblance of power. Self-generated, right? It's an echo chamber, but they feel that power. And then the third reason people usually buy into stuff like this is that they just don't know how the world works. And they're trying to find an answer in the chaos. That's what we do as people, right? We try to find patterns in chaos to make something sensible and meaningful to us. And that's what they're trying to do, right? So when you have a conversation with a person like this, you automatically have to move away from the topic you think you were going to talk about, right? You can't talk about guns. You can't talk about false flag operations. You can't talk about. A reporter once asked me, if you had one of these people that we call hoaxers, if you had one of them sitting right across from you, what would you say to them right now? If somebody was sitting right across from you, what would you say? And I said, I wouldn't say anything. I'd ask questions. Tell me about your dad. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your life. Tell me what it is that led you to this place. Because that's where the answer is for these people. Everything else is just smoke and mirrors, just something to hang on to, whether it's the Majestic 12 or the Illuminati or Sandy Hook or whatever. And fortunately, through legal recourse, as you've seen in the headlines lately, one of the primary peddlers of this nonsense is being taken down in a big way, Alex Jones and his InfoWars nonsense. When he stopped talking about Sandy Hook on his broadcasts, a lot of those social media harassing posts in my life ended. And you can draw a clear, bright, and distinct line between those two things. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's sort of how you have to look at it, in my view. Anybody else?
I do, and I think I may have the last question. Noel, is that right?
Oh, sure.
So thank you again for sharing such a powerful story.
You're welcome.
A question, really two questions that are related, and this is really about the power of healing.
Right.
And how, and if this is too personal, please feel free to pass. How has your family healed from this moment, and how has the Sandy Hook community healed as well?
You've heard people say this before about traumatic grief. It is as individual as your fingerprints. It is as individual as your retinal scan. Every single person is going to grieve differently. My wife and I grieve differently, right? And, some marriages survive something like this and some don't, and I'm happy to tell you that we are as strong as ever. So how I personally found healing was to learn about our country, to learn about these things I shared with you today, and then to come out and tell you the things I learned. How many of you, raise your hands, how many of you knew about the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act before today? 5 of you, 6. That's an enormous piece of legislation. That has an enormous effect on our lives. I didn't know about it before Ben was killed. So as a family, we did what we do. My wife is a performer, and she's a musician, and so she started writing music and writing songs and putting herself into that work. She put herself heavily into Ben's Lighthouse to teach kids, to learn ways to teach kids about empathy and connectivity and sharing who they truly are in a safe and healthy and positive way. Right? The community is a slightly different story because it's full of lots of different people, right? So people found different ways to heal, but we were given a very generous gift from the General Electric Corporation. I think it might have been to assuage some guilt because Peter Lanza, the father, was an employee of theirs. But a lot of people in Newtown worked at General Electric, and so they gave the town a significant gift, and with that gift, we built a community center. And there's classes and activities and the whole community. It's a beautiful hub, and it's right in the middle of that Fairfield Hills campus. And it's this beautiful hub where people can come and do all kinds of creative and wonderful things to be with each other. But healing is, at the end of the day, intensely personal. And a community, frankly, can, and this may sound a little negative, but I don't believe a community can or should heal from an event like this. Our town will be marked by this for the rest of our lives, the way you think about Aurora and Columbine and Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, and so many other places now. And maybe it's time for people to stand up in a community and say, you know what, we are not stronger than this. You know what, we probably won't be fine for a while. And admit that. You hear people say, well, we're strong, we'll get through it. Maybe admit that you're not as strong as you think you might be right now. And do the work, the hard work, to go inside and help yourself and those around you. I don't know if that answered your question, but thanks.
Thank you again, David. Unfortunately, this does bring our convocation to a close. Thank you all once again for being here today.
Thank you.